Okay, now let's look at multiple return values. This function just shows us both the sum and the difference of two values. And as you can see, 5 and 10 are going up to this arg and that arg. And then we're calculating the sum and the difference of those two values and returning the two of them. This is another made-up function that doesn't do a hell of a lot. But the point is that we're returning two values, and I want us to understand how return values work with the variables that we're putting in the call. When I say the call, of course, you know I'm talking about line 19. I'm calling addSum, and I'm expecting two values to come back. Now, when we see mySum and myDiff being returned, this is two values being returned, but actually we're returning a tuple. Now, you'll remember from the multi-target assignment that anytime we express two values with commas in between, if we don't give it any brackets, we're talking about a tuple. That means that we are returning a tuple. I've never discussed this in the past because in the beginning when we talked about functions, I just wanted you to match up the number of values being returned with the number of names in the call, being assigned to in the call. So you can see that addSum is assigning to numSum and numDiff. Great. Fine. MySum and myDiff now get named numSum and numDiff, and we should see the result. As long as I get rid of an exit and make sure that I'm all clear, we should see 5 and -5, which is, or 15 and -5, which is what I'm expecting. But understand that this is a tuple that's being assigned to two names. So if you remember from multi-target, if we assign multiple values to multiple names, it will work as long as the number of values is the same. If we have fewer or greater number of values, then we're going to have a problem. And that's when we get into not enough values to unpack. Let's look at what happens when we do that with a function. What if I were to add a third value to the left side of addSum, expecting 3 values to come back? I'm going to get the very same error. That was running multi-target. Here we go. Okay, not enough values to unpack. Expected 3 got 2. This is precisely what happened with our tuple. And why is that? Because basically what we're seeing on line 16 to line 19 is a multi-target assignment. That is, a tuple is being unpacked into variable names on the left side of the call to addSum. So mySum would go to numSum, myDiff would go to numDiff, and we asked for 3 values, and so we got not enough values to unpack. The same thing would be true if we tried to return multiple values, but there was a mismatch on the other side, returning 3 values to 2 variable names. That's also a no-no. That's also a problem. Too many values to unpack. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Do you remember what happened when we return multiple values? And that, as you know, that means that that's a tuple, multiple values to a single name. What happens then? Well, then all we're really doing is returning a tuple and assigning it to a name. So that's going to be fine with Python because when we run this, we'll see that it simply returned the tuple. And that's true whether we have parentheses there or not. It's not returning 3 values, it's actually returning a tuple of 3 values. So the same thing is true here. When we return mySum, myDiff, we're returning a 2-item tuple. And if we assign it to 2 names, that'll work fine. But here's your quiz question, and you may want to pause to see that you've got this. If I assign 2 values to 1 name, will it work? And if it does, what is the value of numSum? Go ahead and pause it and see if you can predict. Okay, let's look. Well, as we saw, when you're returning multiple values, you're actually returning a tuple. If you were to assign a tuple to a name, would that be okay? Of course, you can assign a tuple to a name. That's how we initialize tuples. So what we'll see then, as long as I run the right script, is a tuple, 15 and -5. The other print 15 was from the earlier code. So we're returning 15 and -5, which is correct. We're assigning it to a single name, and that just becomes a tuple assignment. Now, how you decide to do this is up to you. You can choose to return multiple values and assign them to multiple names. You can choose to return multiple values and assign them to a single name and then use the tuple. Maybe you'd like to print num_sum 0 and then num_sum 1. You could even choose to return a list of these values and assign them to multiple names or to a single name. Whatever you'd like to do, it doesn't really make a difference. What matters is that you understand the multi-target assignment is in play when we return multiple values. And it's our choice whether we choose to assign to multiple names or to a single name. Totally up to us. All that's really important is that you understand the dynamic.